Chapter 17. Piles. Again, Stasha and I traveled fast. The dim moon lit our way as we trekked along the broad road, and I thought of Chud again. If only he could see me now, what I was attempting to do. Maybe he was. We passed the snoozing guard at the suburb border. Did he sleep every night? And entered Middleton. We wove through the narrow streets, careful to stay a couple feet from the forest edge, out of view of the sporadic patrol officers. An hour later, my gaze fell on my faction house with its scrawled faction number and chipped paint illuminated by the soft glow of the moon. It always felt like I was looking at the building for the first time. After everything that had happened in the past couple days, the house appeared more like some alien structure with a throbbing evil heart behind its dreary facade than anything that had once resembled home. We snuck around its inside, and I grabbed the metal handle on the bottom of the large right garage door. I slowly pulled it up. A loud creak ripped through the night air, and I froze. Crap, I hissed under my breath. We listened in the freezing night, but no sounds came from inside the garage. The horses must have still been asleep. Thank power. Hurry up and slide under, I whispered. There should be enough room. Stasha got on her hands and knees and rolled under. She held the door up while I went. I barely fit. She let the door down slower than I did, and it let out a longer but much lighter creak. We froze and listened again, but no sounds came from inside the house or the side of the room where the horses were tethered. I grabbed Stasha's hand and led her through the pitch black toward where my faction's transport, some old paint-chipped vehicle called an SUV, had been sitting. My other outstretched hand touched the metal. I cringed. It was as cold as a sheet of ice. Here. I lay on my back and inched under the car. It was pretty high off the ground. Definitely a good thing. Stasha must have done the same as me, because a few seconds later her voice wafted from a couple inches away. "I'm under. Now what? We just wait until morning?" I guess. Already my eyelids seemed like they'd grown twice as heavy since we entered the garage. I'm getting pretty tired, though. How about this? We alternate sleeping. That way, if one of us snores, the other will wake them up before they arouse the horses. Sounds fair to me. Plus one of us must alert the other when Pete comes to transport the VOs to the manor. You sleep first. No, you should. I insist. I don't think I could doze right now if I tried. Too pumped about the mission. I let out a light chuckle. If you say so. As excited as I'd been on the way over, I wasn't sure I could say I was pumped anymore. I turned away from Stasha and closed my eyes. Her body curled against my back, so soft and warm, and she placed an arm around my side, resting it on my stomach. "For warmth," she said. "Right, of course." I placed my arm over hers. "And because I've grown rather fond of you." A surge of heat puffed through me, and I'm sure it wasn't because of Stasha's body right against mine, though that definitely helped. Still, I couldn't help but wonder why she hadn't looked back at the reproduction faction, nor why she hadn't wanted to join Marfa and me at first at the farmhouse. I didn't even remember falling asleep. I jolted awake to a loud thud. A hand clapped to my lips, and I stared into hazel eyes with way too much white in them. Stasha's. She raised the pointer finger of her other hand to her own lips. Right. We were under the transport in my faction house's garage, and we were hopefully about to, break into the manor. I must have turned over in my sleep, which explained why I faced her. I squinted and nodded a little, trying to tell Stasha I knew what was up. She took her hand away as footsteps echoed. Then she moved her head away, and I could make out faded gray shoes riddled with holes walking to the far side of the room across the white concrete ground. Had to be Pete's, which meant the thud that woke me must have been the door that led to the house. Light spilled through the garage door windows and lit the room. So it was morning. Stasha had let me sleep the whole time. Wow. So nice of her. Though now that her body wasn't wrapped around me, the morning chill ate through my clothes and soaked my bones, making me shiver constantly. My back had morphed to a sheet of ice that had been temporarily frozen to the concrete floor, so I propped myself on my arm and stretched it. "Come on, you stupid horses," Pete said in his high, squeaky voice. "Time for another stupid trip to the stupid mansion, just like every stupid day." Whoa. That was the most I'd ever heard Pete say at once in my whole life. Guess he usually let off steam in the garage, where he thought no one was around to hear him. He continued to grumble under his breath as he apparently untied the horses from the wall and fastened each of their ropes to the metal poles somebody had implanted onto the hood of the SUV a long time ago. The poles rose from the opposite sides of the front of the vehicle. I'd only seen the SUV in my torch's dim light when I dumped my VOs into one of the large plastic bins at the end of each day, But from time to time I'd see a VO transport out on the suburb streets when I came home from work, and they all looked the same. Pete's feet shuffled to the back of the SUV. The trunk squealed open, and then his feet headed toward the door that led into the house. He grunted as he lifted one of the bins. All I could see was the bottom of the bin as it rose out of sight. He dropped the box next to the trunk with a loud thud, and Stasha and I jolted. Thankfully, the thud hid our sounds. "Unbelievable," Pete said. "Did the stupid supply hunters have to get the heaviest VOs in the whole stupid town yesterday?" Light clunks came from above our heads as Pete transferred the VOs from the bin to the SUV. Every once in a while, the car rocked a bit as he dumped something heavy inside. Sheesh. He hadn't been kidding. The back seats must have also been pushed down to make room for as many VOs as possible. I'd discovered the seats could be shifted down when I'd explored that car in the middle of town. Pete put the empty bin back by the door that led into the house, and then carried and dumped the contents of the other 3 bins into the back of the car, though their VOs weren't nearly as heavy as the first bins. He lifted the double garage door in front of the SUV with a long, ear-splitting creak, and climbed into the SUV, which barely moved from his puny weight. I imagined him sitting up there, his head poking above the top of the car like some overgrown weed. Not just because he was tall, but because the top of the front of the SUV had been removed so that generations of housekeepers had room to whip the horses into action or pull on their reins to slow them down. How long had it taken the Badalux family to think of that one? 20 years? A couple days? "I assume now would be the opportune time to climb up," Stasha whispered. I looked up. 2 metal rods ran side by side each other along the middle of the vehicle, each veering away towards opposite wheels at the ends of the SUV. Stasha and I lay toward the back wheels, so we grabbed the rod above each of our heads, pulled our bodies up so we were suspended a couple inches above the ground, and wrapped our legs around our respective pipes farther down along the underside of the car. Fortunately, since my body was in a straight position, the fire poker strapped by the vine to the side of my body didn't bother me. A sharp crack of the whips echoed in the garage, and the SUV jolted into action. My heart leaped into my mouth. We were really doing this. The transport wobbled out of the garage and along the uneven weed-infested driveway, but Stasha and I held tight. The vehicle wove through the suburban streets. Stasha and I glanced at each other from time to time. Her face was twisted, like how mine probably looked because how tough it was to hold onto the beams. At least Pete avoided the potholes. My hands were bright white. How long could I hold on? We hold on. My hand slipped loose and Stasha let out a small gasp. I grabbed the rod again just before my other hand lost grip. I retightened that hand's grip. This was going to be tough. Real tough. My arms already started to ache. "Stupid SUV," Pete grumbled particularly loudly. I never realized just how much he hated his job. He'd always been such a quiet kid. The transport stopped and I gritted my teeth. My arms felt like they were being slowly pulled out of their sockets. They shook hard, and so did Stasha's. "I don't think I can take much more of this," I said. More a gasp than a statement. "Me neither," Stasha said in a strained voice. "Stupid line," Pete said. Line? I glanced along the ground up ahead. Another set of wheels sat on the cobblestone streets a few yards up to the left. We had to wait for at least one whole transport to be unloaded by the guards at the mansion, and there were probably a lot more transports from the sound of it. There was no way we could hold on for that. Stasha's arms trembled like crazy as she lowered herself to the ground and lay there. I scrounged up the last of my energy to hiss, "What are you doing? Are you out of your mind?" She sucked in a breath. "Come on, we can rest until we move up in the line." Why didn't I think of that? I lowered myself to the ground too, and got in my share of air as intense release spread through both me and my arms. What would I do without you? Either be lying open in the road for all of Middleton to see, or on the bottom of another transport's wheel. We both chuckled. Then a realization hit me, one that made my spine as cold as the cracked concrete I lay on. Wait a minute, there's probably going to be a line of transports outside the mansion all day. It seemed there was a schedule that designated when each faction made the trip to the mansion, probably so the place didn't get bombarded with deliveries. It explained why I'd seen VO transports on my way back from work. The Badaluxes might have been corrupt, but they were clever too. After we knock out the guards, all the housekeepers are going to be suspicious when they don't come back for the next car after a few minutes. What are we going to do about that? Stasha bit her bottom lip, her gaze glued at the bottom of the car. "I wouldn't be overly concerned. They're just lowly housekeepers. They can't make their way onto the manor's property to make inquiries. They'll just have to wait." Plus, we're attempting to make this as quick as possible, correct? I nodded, and every muscle in my body relaxed. First unexpected potential disaster avoided. The whip cracked above us, and we both grabbed the rods again as the SUV lurched forward. It stopped a few yards later, and we lowered ourselves to the ground and rested again for a few minutes. We did that 2 more times until a gruff voice said, "That's far enough. Get out and wait." The SUV door creaked open, and Pete's faded gray shoes hit the ground next to 2 huge pairs of crisp black ones. The 4 black shoes lifted out of view, and the vehicle rocked as what had to be the mansion guards settled in the 2 front seats. The whip cracked, and we grabbed the beams yet again as the SUV jolted into action. Adrenaline churned through me. Almost there. The transport wound along another cracked gray road. My arms started to shake real bad again. I shut my eyes and bit the insides of my cheeks, but it wasn't working. Please get there soon. I opened my eyes. Stasha trembled violently beside me. We weren't going to make it. I was going to lose my grip, like now. The car wobbled onto a concrete floor like the one in my faction's garage and stopped. I lowered myself to the ground and let go. My arms burned as though they'd been set on fire, but the pain started to fade. Thank power. That had been close. A couple more seconds and I would have dropped with a loud thud to the ground. I bet Stasha had been real close to doing that too. She lay on the concrete, chest also heaving. Somebody threw the trunk open, and the car rocked as someone climbed inside above us and rummaged around. "Garbage pile," said the deep voice of a 16-year-old with some gruffness to it. The pair of crisp black shoes still on the ground ran off to the left side of the car. Crap. What if the guard sees us? I scrunched closer to the center of the car, nearer to Stasha, as a clang echoed on the left side of the car, and the shoes raced back. Stasha and I exchanged glances, her beautiful gray face only inches away from mine. Despite the fact that we were in such a stressful position, the urge to kiss her grew strong again. "Useful pile," the gruff voice said again, and the shoes ran off to the right side of the SUV this time. A light thud rang out from that direction. The guards must have been removing the VOs from the SUV and sorting them into piles. "What should we do?" Stasha mouthed. Good question. She bit her lip, which made her seem scared, but her sharp eyes told me she was ready to spring into action. I racked my brain. Then I leaned my head even closer to her and whispered into her ear. "You trip the guy on the ground the next time he runs off to the right side, and I'll slide out from the left side and attack the guy in the car with the poker. What do you think?" I pulled my head away. She nibbled on her knuckle, then nodded. I took a deep breath. This was the only chance we had. "Garbage," the gruff voice inside the car said, and the shoes ran off to the left side of the car, opposite Stasha's. Then the shoes returned. "Aw, very precious one. Bring it straight to Jalem. He might like this." Jalem, one of the current rulers. But why would he like a particular VO? Maybe it was his job to study certain types, like the Nintendo kind or something. Maybe the other rulers examined other types. The shoes ran past the left side of the SUV again, and a good 2 minutes passed before the guard came back. "Garbage," the hoarse voice said. "Oh, come on." "Useful," the husky voice finally said when the guard returned to the trunk. My heart pounded as loud as I imagined gunshots sounded as I rolled out from under the left side of the car. On the opposite side came the sound of a fleshy hit, a scream, and then a thud. "What the?" the gruff voice asked from inside the SUV. "You all right, Braun?" I grabbed the fire poker strapped to my waist by the vine and yanked it up as I ran around to the back of the car. A hulking kid, about my size and a half, with thick muscles, crouch-walked toward the opening. His gaze met mine and froze. His eyes bulged to the size of ripe tomatoes. I kept yanking the poker up. What the? The poker's hook had caught on the vine. The kid's eyes grew hard. He wound his leg back. I dodged to the side, and the air from his kick whooshed against the side of my face, just as the hook pulled free. I swung the poker. The end without the hook bashed his head as he wound his leg back again. He fell over backward, though managed to kick a VO off the edge of the trunk floor. The object fell and smashed onto my right foot. I screamed as searing pain surged through it. It had been flattened. Dear Mother of Power, it had just been totally flattened. I shoved the heavy object away, crumpled to the ground, grabbed my foot with both hands, and writhed, eyes shut. "Are you all right?" I vaguely heard Stasha squeal. Her shadow fell over me as I continued to thrash around on the ground. Pain ruled through me in never-ending doses. Of all the insanely awful luck, I didn't have my quiet feet anymore. How are we going to finish our mission now? Make sure the guy in the car is unconscious, I barely pushed out. A moment later, he is. It felt like an eternity before the agony finally started to die down. I looked up at Stasha's face, which hovered above me, wrinkled with concern. What hit me? I asked. Appears to be a monitor. Are you all right, Goran? I twisted my head toward the large white object with a black glass rectangle on it that lay on the ground next to me. Great. It would only make sense for my foot, and therefore our mission, to be squashed by another type of device the rulers supposedly never figured out the purpose of. Well, they discovered monitors were a part of computers, and at one point they thought computers had something to do with rediscovering power. But what else was new? Then again, maybe computers did have something to do with rediscovering power, and the Badalux family never told the rest of Middleton. Yeah, I'm okay, I murmured. This is definitely going to make it harder to sneak around the mansion, though. I'd be slow and clunky now. Fantastic. But I think I can at least try to stand now. Take your time. She took a step back. We don't have time. Didn't she realize this was our only chance and it was hightailing fast? Please take off the guard suits now while I try to stand before they regain consciousness. She clasped her hand around her neck, her expression pinched. Perhaps we should call this off. You admit you're in no condition for spying. Perhaps we should just leave before... No, we're doing this now. We might not get another chance. No way I was giving up. I flattened my hands on the freezing concrete ground and pushed myself onto my good leg. Stasha rushed over and wrapped an arm around my waist, which helped me keep my balance. Even though my foot throbbed with pain, her warm embrace seemed to fight a lot of it off. I grabbed the side of the SUV with both hands. It's okay, I've got this. Go get the suits. Positive? She looked down at my foot, her face knotted up again. Yes, and hurry. She climbed into the back of the SUV and rustling came from that direction. I tested my right foot. Not as bad as I thought, thankfully. I could put some weight on it, and I'd been getting better over the past couple of minutes. I limped around in front of the SUV and checked out my surroundings. We were in an absolutely enormous garage. To the left of the SUV sat mounds of VOs that looked about to fall over and crush Stasha and me and the car. Just about all the objects were ones I'd seen many times before. Drab, worn lamps, chipped, ugly-looking dolls, tons of plastic and metal devices I had no clue what their purpose was. They called all these huge piles off to the left garbage, I said. None are high on the VO list, but what do they mean by that? That they're going to throw out all the stuff? I assume. Stasha jumped down from the SUV with the suit draped over her arms. It was crisp black with silver buttons and no wrinkles whatsoever. I'd never seen such a nice piece of clothing up close before. I ran my hand over it. So smooth. I wouldn't be surprised if the rulers didn't intend to have those objects scrutinized nor safeguarded at all. While I put the kid's large suit on over my clothes, a little tough with my busted foot, but I managed, Stasha ran around the side of the SUV to where the other guard lay unconscious on the ground. More rustling came from that direction. What Stasha said settled in my head as I buttoned the jacket, completing the outfit. Then why bother to ask the factions to bring them all here? Why not just remove them from the VO list and ask for only the useful and precious objects? I'm not entirely positive, her voice wafted from the other side of the car. However, I recall passing a garage dump when I fled from my mansion. I initially assumed it was an old-world dump, but upon further reflection, the rulers must have created it. After all, it was close to their mansion, and they need to have a place to relocate all this trash. I had the feeling she was right. They intended to toss out all this junk. I tightened my hands into fists. The pathetic liars. They claimed part of their job was to preserve all VOs from the old world, even ones that weren't overly valuable, but obviously they'd been lying yet again. I limped to the right side of the SUV. A couple much smaller piles made up of useful VOs, scissors, tape, silverware, rose there. These the rulers definitely put to use, since on Sundays the mansion servants rationed them out to whatever faction needed them. Same with batteries, but I didn't see those here. No, they definitely did something special with those before they sent them out to factions. Stasha came to the back of the SUV, decked out in the guard suit. What do you think? She put her hands on her hips and beamed at me. Every ounce of breath left my body. The suit fit her frame even more snugly than her usual ragged clothing, bringing out her luscious curves. And the suit's crispness made her appear regal, as if she could be in charge of the mansion. My already weak knees grew even frailer, threatening to buckle. Looks good, though I wanted to say, you look so incredible I literally can't even describe how good. It's a shame neither of the guards had guns on them. Well, we're not planning on shooting up the place. More of a stealth mission, you know? Plus, these guys' jobs are probably just to bring all the transports to the mansion and sort through and organize their VOs. They're not the official gate guards. She nodded, then gestured toward the wooden door that led into the mansion. Shall we? One last thing. I limped to the useful VO pile. It didn't take too long to find a roll of tape and a coil of rope. We better tie these guys up so they don't wake up and tell anybody what happened. Excellent idea. Allow me. While she tied the two guards' arms behind their backs with the rope, a realization that made my body temperature boil hit me. You know what? I said. The guards didn't even count how much each object was worth before they put them in the different piles. Good point. A nasty scowl formed on her face. Which means the rulers never keep score. They must have simply fabricated how the factions placed in those ludicrous tournaments of prestige, perhaps even randomly chose a winner every year. Her mind was racing toward exactly where mine was. That must be why they ask for all these VOs, I said. Even the ones they're going to throw out. They want all the factions to think they're tallying up the points, but it's all for show. My voice shook as I finished that statement. Stasha had been right all along. The rulers brainwashed everybody with that awful tournament of prestige, had them distracted with the pointless competition and other incentives so they didn't see what the Bad Luck's family was really up to, whatever that actually was. With any luck, Stasha and I would find out, and then prove it to everyone. They probably even made up the standings in a way that kept each faction motivated for the next tournament, I said while Stasha put the tape over the guards' mouths. That had explained why mine kept getting closer to winning every year. I scratched my cheek so hard it hurt. Must have been rubbing it both in thought and with anger. Then again, I guess it's not mathematically possible for every faction to keep getting closer. Lastly, Stasha dragged the guards behind one of the mountains of trash. Well, that's what happened with my faction too, but then it unexpectedly plummeted quite far in the ranks, and everybody was so angry, they only aspired to work harder. Ah, of course. They probably have lots of strategies they've used over the generations, the worthless pieces of horse crap. I glanced at the fire poker on the ground. More than anything, I wanted to break every window of the SUV and hear the delicious clinks as the shards hit the ground. Instead, I picked up the poker, put it behind my waistband so it would be out of view, and tied rope around it so it'd hold firm. I had already sliced away the vine when I fought the guard. I could barely control the quiver in my voice, both from anger and fear, as I said, "Let's head into the mansion and get our evidence." We walked past the front of the SUV and up the door that led into the manor. Nothing special about it, just a regular wooden door. But what we were about to do wasn't regular. Not at all. I took the deepest breath I'd ever taken in my life. This was it. We were either tantalizingly close to something that could debunk the rulers and lead to a better life for ourselves and our kids, not to mention everybody in Middleton, or disturbingly close to death. All the hair on my body rose as I reached a shaky arm to the door and opened it.